The crowd watched in silence as the officer ripped the white cane from her hands. She never saw it coming. 1 second, she was standing on the sidewalk, waiting for the light to change. The next, the only thing guiding her through a world she couldn't see snapped in two, plastic cracking against concrete as strangers pulled out their phones. She kept her chin lifted. She didn't beg. She didn't yell. But the man who broke her cane thought he was breaking something else too. Her dignity, her power, her place in that street. What he didn't know was that this quiet, blind black woman was not as powerless as she seemed. And before this day was over, the same crowd that stood frozen would witness a truth that officer never saw coming. The question is, why did he target her in the first place, and who was about to make him regret it? The crack echoed across the sidewalk like something far more violent than plastic snapping. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted that she was blind. Another voice yelled for him to stop. Denise stood frozen, hands trembling in empty air, the fragments of her independence scattered at her feet. The officer dropped the broken pieces onto the pavement and told her to cooperate. Phones were no longer discreet. They were raised high. Before that afternoon, Denise Carter lived a life built on discipline, patience, and quiet strength. She lost her sight in her early 30s, but she refused to lose her independence. Every morning, she walked the same 4 blocks to the bus stop, her white cane tapping a steady rhythm against the pavement. The shop owners along the route knew her by name. The barista at the corner cafe always had her order ready before she reached the counter. Denise didn't ask for sympathy. She asked for space to live, but there was one thing Denise understood better than most. Being blind didn't make her invisible. As a black woman, she had felt the shift in tone before. The hesitation in voices, the assumptions wrapped in forced politeness, the way authority sometimes spoke past her instead of to her, until they realized she didn't have anyone standing beside her. Still, she moved through the world with her head high. That day felt no different at first. The air was warm. Traffic hummed. She stood at the corner, waiting for the signal to change, cane resting lightly in her hand. She worked part-time at a community resource center, helping other visually impaired residents navigate paperwork and city services. She believed in systems, even when they didn't always believe in her. Across the street, a patrol car slowed. Denise didn't see it, but it saw her. The patrol car rolled to a stop just feet away. Denise heard the engine idle, heavy and close. Then a door opened. Slow, deliberate. Shoes hit pavement. The voice cut through the noise of the street, sharp and authoritative, asking what she was doing there. She answered calmly, waiting for the light, on her way home from work. The same routine she followed every day, but the questions didn't stop. They shifted, reports of someone matching her description. Loitering, causing disturbances, the words wrapped around her like a net she never saw thrown. People nearby began to slow down. Conversations faded. A few phones lifted discreetly. She explained again. Her job, her route, her routine. It didn't matter. The tone had already changed. Her wrist was grabbed. Firm. Controlling. A warning disguised as procedure. She reminded him quietly that she couldn't see him. The air grew tense. Accusations of noncompliance followed. Claims that she wasn't moving fast enough. That she was being difficult. Then, suddenly, the cane was gone from her grip. The world shifted instantly. Without that slender rod mapping the ground in front of her, space collapsed into uncertainty. She reached out instinctively, but the officer had stepped back. She told him it was her mobility cane. He dismissed it, and before anyone fully processed what was happening, he bent it. People nearby began to slow down. Conversations faded. A few phones lifted discreetly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Denise slowly lowered herself to her knees, not in surrender but in survival. Without her cane, she couldn't judge distance. Couldn't tell where the curb ended or where traffic began. The street felt like a cliff's edge. Her hands searched the ground until her fingers found the broken halves. She pulled them close to her chest. Her phone vibrated inside her purse. Once. Twice. Again. The officer demanded to know who was calling. She didn't answer immediately. She reached carefully into her bag, every movement deliberate, every breath measured. When she lifted the phone, the screen reader's voice spoke the caller's name aloud into the charged silence. A name tied to power, a name tied to the very department standing over her. The crowd murmured. The officer's posture stiffened. Confidence, drained from his expression as recognition settled in. The phone kept ringing. Another patrol car arrived. Then a supervisor. The balance of power shifted in real time. Questions were no longer directed at Denise. They were directed at him. Cameras stayed locked on his face as he tried to explain. Denise was gently guided to a bench. A stranger placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. Someone else carefully gathered the broken pieces of her cane. For the first time since it snapped, she exhaled. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't resisted. She had simply existed. And that had been enough. By nightfall, the video had spread far beyond that street corner. Strangers debated it. Commentators dissected it. Officials promised reviews and investigations. In the days that followed, new canes arrived at her door. Dozens of them. Messages of support. Messages of apology. But none of it erased the sound of that crack. Because what broke that afternoon wasn't just graphite and plastic. It was trust. Trust that walking home is not a crime. Trust that disability will be met with care, not suspicion. Trust that being black in public doesn't make you a threat. Denise lost her sight years ago. But that day revealed something far more disturbing. Sometimes the real blindness belongs to those who refuse to see humanity standing right in front of them. So the question isn't just what happened on that sidewalk. The question is how many more cracks have to echo through our streets before we finally decide to open our eyes.